extremely valuable time for us and speaking to this audience present here, as well as those of us who are joining us online through different social media platforms. So, just for a very brief introduction, Dr. Ammar is a senior research scientist at A Data, where he leads the Chinese Development Finance Program. His team develops pioneering methods such as tracking underreported financial flows methodology to track and analyze underreported financial flows from non-traditional donors to developing countries. And he holds a PhD in public policy from George Mason University, MA in public affairs, MA in public policy from National University of Singapore, and BS honors in economics and mathematics from Lahore University of Management Sciences. So now, just before going to the topic, let me just set some very brief housekeeping rules. The event is being live streamed on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and we have guests joining us from different regions. We also invite questions from our guests sitting over here, as well as those of you who has joined us online. So please have the chat box open in a window, as well as you can also indicate that you want to speak by clicking the raise hand option as well. I think so with this, we can officially commence the program. And this is where I would like to invite, firstly, Dr. Waqar Ahmed, the Joint Executive Director at STPI, for his opening remarks. So yes, thank you, Dr. Waqar. Over to you.
Thank you, Obed. Thank you to colleagues who have organized this, Hassan, Murtaza, and team. My special thanks to Dr. Ammar and, of course, the discussants for today's discussion, Dr. Khalid and Dr. Friha. And when Ammar Saab contacted me, I really jumped to this opportunity of having him on this subject, given, of course, our deep interest in this area, but also because of his very insightful work in this area, which we have been really benefiting from and studying over the past few months and years, of course. We, of course, were always in awe of his work when he was in his earlier organization as well, Urban Institute, I remember, where we had a chance to collaborate with the Urban Institute. And I remember STPI was part of some of the consultations due to the linkages and bridges which Ammar Saab had built. So thank you very much for your availability today. Now, of course, BRI remains probably one of the most ambitious development projects globally. And of course, while many have studied this, we have also taken our own lens to study this through, as our name implies, sustainable development. And if I can be more focused, sustainable development goals, SDGs. That's the kind of lens that we have taken. And what we realize is that more than a project, BRI is a vision, of course, not just for connectivity, but also for overall development. And second point, I think that we have continued to make through research and advocacy that we do in STPI is how best the recipient or collaborating countries are to receive BRI or support under BRI. I'm sure that in case of Pakistan, many of you are more qualified and more well-read than myself to understand that while, of course, China has been trying to support at a very fast pace, but the absorptive capacity of countries is something which has come under question mark. And of course, it falls on us how well prepared we are to sort of engage with the Chinese counterparts in a very productive manner so that we also move at a fast pace and do not slow down the pace of somebody who's helping us or trying to help us. Of course, when the projects were packaged under BRI, of course, they were investment arrangements, they were debt arrangements, if I can say, they were investment-led trade arrangements as well. And that is where, I think that's where the title of Dr. Ammar's presentation is very interesting. And I pick up just one word from it, which is de-risking. So whenever you are trying to engage in any business transaction, may it be aid, trade, or investment, this is the primary thing that probably both giver and the taker has to take into account from both sides. Within de-risking, one of the aspects that, for example, Pakistan and China continue to talk about is the payments issue. The fact that Chinese are well invested in our energy sector and energy plus investments that they have. But of course, the timeliness of payments that have to go to them, that has remains a concern, something which, of course, the Power Division, the Ministry of Energy continues to address along with the Ministry of Finance. And I'm sure that things would be smoothened out. In terms of research on BRI, STPI really responded with a lot of interest, and we now have a full-time dedicated China Study Center. And it's been around over 5 years or so, I'd say. And one of the things that China Study Center championed since the start was the Green BRI initiative. The fact that we were encouraged to see Chinese support in the energy sector, but it was the element of green that one was more interested in to pursue, to ensure, and not just in energy, but also in other trade, investment, tourism, agriculture, and other areas where Chinese were engaging with their Pakistani counterparts. And therein again, I think our energy unit, Dr. Khalid, Ubaid, and their teams have really deep dived into green financing of BRI as well, something that we look at it not just from a energy perspective, but also the accounting models, the green accounting models that are out there. And we then link them up with the ESG framework as well. There's also, when one talks about green BRI, and I'm sure Dr. Ammar will talk further with his own lens, one of the things that we see now that you have several evaluations of CPEC which have come out, one of the things that we see is the capacity or the capabilities gap to receive such kind of a financing. So while you are implementing an energy sector project, let's say in the heart of Punjab or maybe urban Sindh, and you may have capacities, but similar capacities need to be, of course, ensured in other parts of Pakistan as well to ensure balanced development. So that was another learning, and remains a learning, that capacity development or faster capacity building, even capacity substitution, has to go hand in hand once such mega investments are taking place, because eventually one has to take it over and run it themselves and maintain the asset, the public asset themselves. These are, of course, some of our thoughts which we continue to do in this area as STPI. And we have recently also submitted some of our research and recommendations from Green BRI and Green Financing of BRI for Planning Commission's forthcoming 5-year development plan 2024-2029, on which, of course, Planning Commission's section chiefs are working, and we are now on a daily basis looking at their output. So with these remarks, I really look forward to listening to Dr. Ammar's presentation. So it's back to you, Ubaid.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Waqar, for setting a really good scene. I think I'm very glad to mention here that we've also been joined here by the colleagues from Embassy of People's Republic of China in Islamabad here. And I think with them, we're also working on a program which we actually call the CPEC Green Development Program, and that comes under the initiative Dr. Waqar mentioned, that is the greening of the BRI. So I think perhaps a bit later we'll also be coming, we'll also request Dr. Ammar to slightly speak on that as well. But again, firstly, coming to the main topic at hand, that is the Belt and Road Reboot and Beijing's bid to de-risk its global infrastructure initiative. I think most of us have already got the invite and have the link to the report that Dr. Ammar previously mentioned as well. So if I may request MIS team to kindly share the presentation that we have. And with this, Dr. Ammar, once again, thank you. It's over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ubaid. Thank you, Dr. Vakar and the STPI team. It is a real pleasure to be here in STPI. After many years, I've participated in your conferences, but never on site here. So very happy to be here. As you can, let me just make some kind of scene setting. This is going to be a presentation in which I describe China's global Belt and Road strategy and what I see happening right now, which is a new BRI. We call it BRI 2.0. And my goal is for all of us to collectively understand what is this BRI 2.02. And in the second half of my presentation, I can talk about specific findings from Pakistan. How much time, Ubaid, can I use for my remarks? Because I would love to also interact with.
Yes, I think you can. Yeah, it's pretty open.
Okay, great,
So, yeah,
wonderful.
it's good. Yeah.
I'll try to contain my remarks to about 20 minutes or so. I have some slides that I think I can use this to move them. Perfect. So when this is a report that came out in November of 2023, it contains 4 chapters. It's a pretty long report, but not only is this report long, it is also backed by a data set. When we released this report, it came with a data set, which we call the Global Chinese Development Finance data set. It has about 21,000 projects. And we have also launched a new interactive dashboard. So if you're only interested in a given country, in a given sector, or you want to do some keyword searches, let's say you're only interested in lithium projects in Argentina, you can just download that. And we did this because you all are researchers and many of you are quantitative researchers. So downloading a spreadsheet with 21,000 rows and 140 columns, which are all variables, is easy for some of us, but not for all of us. So we are trying our best to try to take this message overseas. And of course, there's been a huge amount of interest in this topic, and we have been riding on this wave as Data has been publishing this data set and updating it for the last 11 years. When our report came out in November, it was all big global media outlets, from the New York Times to Wall Street Journal to The Guardian, you name it. And this is just a snapshot of this. We were on the BBC and so on. And of course, we also received a lot of regional and local media coverage, including in Pakistan, Dawn, Tribune, the news. I had interviews with the Dawn News and other channels as well. So of course, this is of enormous interest to the world, but it also is a responsibility then to make sure that we are responsible and providing all the context of this. So before I jump into what we actually find in our report, I want to do some scene setting. What is the Global Chinese Development Finance data set and why do we build it? One thing you have to understand is that unlike G7 donors, which have been the dominant players since the Second World War, China does not systematically report its development financing activities to any aid transparency initiative or on their own website, which creates a huge information void. And it is important to plug that void so that countries like Pakistan, who are on the receiving end of this assistance, can know what money is coming where, and other donors can also adjust their strategies to that. So aid data is essentially in the business of plugging that gap. What we essentially do is we take the OECD's creditor reporting system guidelines. OECD is a institution of 30 member countries based in Paris. They have been standardizing aid reporting and aid transparency for the last 60 years. And we basically collect data from the open sources and the official sources and put it all together as if China was officially reporting to the OECD. So tomorrow, I always joke that tomorrow, if Chinese government decides to start, participating in these systems, then we will be out of business. But so far, there is no indication that that might be happening. All in all, just to give you the sense of the breadth of this data set, and actually, I want to spend a couple of minutes on this because I would love you all to use this data. It's a public good. It's all fully available online. Anybody can download and use it. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer your questions. I also have a team in William and Mary who will be happy to answer your questions. As I said, there's 21,000 projects in this data set. And what we found is that there are nearly 800 official sector Chinese agencies which are providing financing for
projects all around the world. These projects are in 165 countries, and they're worth $1.34 trillion. We have also identified over 1,200 co-financiers, which, by the way, include Western banks as well as multilateral institutions who are participating in these projects. So while most of the world thinks that Belt and Road is a Chinese initiative, and no doubt it is, there is a lot of non-Chinese money that's also flowing in. Because one thing I know, being a banker myself in a previous life, is that money follows returns. Like wherever there is good return to be made, capitalists from all over the world are pretty much the same. And this data set covers a 22-year commitment period. We go by commitment years from the year 2000 to 2021. My team is actively collecting data on 2022 and 2023. But given the vast scale of this data collection effort, it takes us years of hard work to get to this point. All in all, we have over 5,000 borrowing institutions, 133 variables. So for each project, let's say if you're interested in let's say the Rashakai special economic zone, or you can take one of the power projects in Pakistan, you will get precise locational details, you will get precise temporal details. When was the project first pledged? When was it committed? When did the work start? When was it supposed to end? When did it actually end? And those of you who do impact evaluations know why that is important, because the more precise you are temporally and spatially, the better you can get in terms of understanding why this project is having an effect. And for those of you who do qualitative work, and I know a lot of people now do text analysis, and ChatGPT and AI has changed this dramatically. We have in each of these projects, if you go to china.8data.org right now, you can see these. We have cradle to grave descriptions of each project, which is basically the story of the project. We spend a lot of time writing this out in a way that you can search through them and create data. So if you put all of them together, it is 3.8 million words. 38 full-length books can be built from that. And all of this data is in the public realm, as I said, and it is backed by 150,000 sources. All of those sources are available, and 90% of our project records are backed by official sources. So it is, and again, those sources are also fully available. This is some examples of the kinds of documents that we are able to obtain from aid management platforms through direct correspondence with developing country governments. And we have released some of these documentation so you can see the terms and conditions under which the projects are being implemented. Again, this is all available for you. So in terms of big picture, what's actually happening? First thing that you have to understand is there's been a narrative built in, especially in Western media, but also in think tanks and research institutions who work on the Belt and Road. The impression is that the Belt and Road has slowed down significantly. New commitments are down. China is struggling to manage the BRI, and that it has slowed down. What we find is that contrary to these beliefs, when you do the numbers, China is still the single largest provider of foreign aid and credit anywhere in the world. Their portfolio is still hovering at around $80 billion a year, which is above the 72 billion that the World Bank does, for example, or the 60 billion that the US is able to provide. And when you see the color of the money on both charts, you will see, I'm using the term OOF and ODA. The short way of understanding this is ODA is grants and aid, 0% interest rate loans or highly concessional loans. OOF is official sector, other official flows, which is basically loans. And most of what China is doing, actually, if you look at the top chart on the left side, is being done through OOF, not through ODA. And that trend has continued throughout. Of course, the peak of Chinese overseas financing came in the early years of the BRI in 2016, 2017. But after a fall during COVID, we are seeing that the numbers are coming back up again. So big takeaway is BRI is not dead. BRI is alive and well. It's changing, it's evolving, but it's not dead. The other thing that you have to understand is that, again, those of you who follow Western media know this, that the United States and its allies are staging a major counter initiative called the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. And the idea is that if China can provide this sort of financing, so can we. So when you look at the numbers, the red line on the top left side is China. Of course, there was a time in 2016 when China alone was providing more assistance than all G7 countries combined. Today, the story has changed, where if you do the numbers, the US has made major increases. You see the big increase from 2020 to 2021 as the Biden government came. Same story goes for G7 because the Europeans are also coming into the act. And the color of the money is also shifted. So if you look at the bottom chart, you see a lot of dark blue in the 2014 to 2020 years. But suddenly now there is a 15-fold increase in the financing of the US Development Finance Corporation, which alone is $20 billion. That has brought the US from 40 billion to 60 billion a year. So while China is and will remain the single largest financier, G7 together is outspending China by a big margin. We have also, as I said, we have also done quite extensive mapping of all of our data sets. So this is a little pixelated, but you can see the high resolution imagery. But you see that the major locations or concentrations of Chinese projects are in Southeast Asia. So if you go over to the east of India, look at Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Laos, that kind of area, all the way into even Indonesia, there's a lot of concentration. Sri Lanka is dark. Pakistan, of course, is there as well. And then you see a lot of projects in both East Africa and West Africa. You see the bottom left in Africa, that is the mineral-rich parts of Africa, where Angola and Zambia and other countries have major reserves of critical minerals. And those of you who work on energy economics know why it is so critical for China to obtain those supply chains. Now, the question is, China launched the Belt and Road in 2013. China was already doing major projects all around the world. But, as you know, in this country, we had the Karakoram Highway in the 1970s and so on. However, the risk profile has changed quite a bit. And this report really is focused on three kinds of risks. So I'll talk about them first, and then I'll go into the details. So three risks that we see China is facing. This is why this report is about de-risking. And I'm going to try to explain to you what China's strategy is overall. First risk that China is facing with this big, global initiative is repayment risk, financing risk. And global interest rates have gone up. It's hard for countries to keep up with the payments. Dr. Waqar alluded to that, but Pakistan is not the only country facing that. Zambia has defaulted, Sri Lanka has defaulted, Ethiopia has technically defaulted, and a lot of countries are facing debt distress. So that's the first risk China is dealing with. Second is performance risk. Dr. Waqar talked about ESG, environmental standards and performance. That is a big concern as well on the Belt and Road. And the third is reputational risk, or what I would call soft power or the influence game, because in the global chessboard of big power competition, both China and the US and the West are vying for influence. So which country has more influence matters. First thing you have to consider, I'll throw some statistics at you really quickly in terms of repayment links. Consider this, 55% of the $1.34 trillion portfolio that I'm talking about is now due for repayment. So that era, or like the honeymoon period where a lot of money was flowing out of China, coming into developing countries, is over. And it's time to come back. The money has to come back. There is a debt collection effort that needs to be made. And we're talking about a $1 trillion debt collection effort. 80% of the loan portfolio is in debt distress countries, according to the IMF. And that includes our own country and many others. And so this is a major effort, and that has, I think, profound implications for China's strategic position as well as for the global system, because, as we always say that, debt collectors don't win a lot of popularity contests. It's a difficult business to be in. Second is on the loan performance. So consider this. So in the year 2000, which is the first year in which we start doing data collection, only 17 projects worth $450 million were facing ESG challenges. So environmental hazards or environmental disasters or social problems such as relocation problems or other scandals around corruption as far as governance was concerned. This is again derived from our data set. Today, that problem is spanning 1,700 projects worth $450 billion with a B. Which means that you're dealing with a much bigger, because of the nature of the project, because of the nature of the countries and the places and the sectors that China is involved itself in, they are dealing with a much bigger ESG challenge than ever before. So in terms of the size of the portfolio, that has gone from 12% ESG risk in 2000 to over 50% today. And cancellations and suspensions have also gone up. So again, if you have a dashboard of the world and you're sitting in Beijing and looking at all the BRI projects, you see a lot of flashing red lights right now. So what do you do about it? And second part of my talk, I'll talk a little bit about that. The third is reputation. So when you do public opinion polling, around the world, this is again the average of all the countries that have received Chinese development financing using Gallup World Poll data, which, by the way, is a fabulous source of information. They charge you a lot for the data, but once you pay it, you can reuse it. So since 2006, Gallup has been asking this question in all developing countries about favorability toward different countries. And the gap between China and the US has changed quite a lot in 2000. I think in 2016, 17, and during the Trump years, the US faced a lot of challenges at the global stage. And what we saw is that between 2020 and 2021, the US now has an advantage. Of course, with the situation in Israel, between Israel and Gaza right now, I assume this is going to change in the negative direction for the US. But in 2021, this is what the situation was. And overall, when you look at three markers of soft power that we look at media sentiment using machine learning. We do sentiment analysis on millions of reports of media that GDELT program collects. This is a research initiative at the University of Michigan. They basically take all podcast transcripts and all newspaper articles from all over the world and give you a sentiment score. Is it positive or is it negative? And we do that. And then we also look at UN General Assembly voting data, where China has much better alignment with the rest of the world than the US for obvious reasons. But what we found is that in the recent years of BRI, China has suffered more losses than the United States. So it makes sense, because as more projects run into repayment problems, as projects run into ESG problems, the sentiment has begun to change. But overall, in the General Assembly, at least, the US, China has a big advantage. So what are the policy implications, and why is it so important for us to update our understandings of what the BRI is? This is what we call going from BRI 1.0 to 2.0. Now, let me explain to you something quite incredible is actually taking place. In Chinese studies, if you read Chinese studies literature, a lot of scholars believe that China's state system is fragmented. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and that the BRI is not like a line item in the budget of the Chinese state, which says this project is BRI and this project is not BRI. I mean, if I do this for a living, I can't tell you what is the definition of the BRI, what is BRI, what's not. However, the Chinese nervous system is working very, very rapidly, and they are evolving, they're learning, and they're making some major changes. That is why I think understanding this is so important. So first thing that you have to understand is, if you look at the top left chart, the red line indicates the money that is being given to developing countries in what we call emergency loans. In Pakistan's case, we hear a lot about deposits, short-term deposits, which are 12 months or less. And then this debt swaps, currency swaps in RMB, that Pakistan has a facility, RMB meaning yuan, the Chinese currency. Pakistan and other countries have been drawing down on this in a big way. So you look at the percentages, the proportion of money that China is giving out in dollar-denominated infrastructure projects has been coming down. Look at the green line. It was all the way up above 90% when BRI was launched. Now it's down to 31%. Emergency lending is going on. And this is making sense, because what's happening is a lot of countries took out loans in the early part of the BRI, having trouble repaying it, and China's bailing them out, basically saying, here's some liquidity, you can take care of your. I mean, Pakistan is exactly going through this. So at the superficial level, they are bailing out the countries like Pakistan, like Argentina. But if you look at it at a deeper level, I think they're bailing out themselves. They're bailing out their own banks, which are facing a repayment challenge. And of course, the other thing that you have to understand, on the top and the bottom right corner, you see that in the early years of the BRI, there was a lot of blue color, or the grayish, teal color in the middle, where state-owned policy banks, which are Exim Bank and CDB, they were the main players. However, in recent years, the big player has become PBOC, which is the Chinese Central Bank, and SAFE, the state agency for foreign exchange reserves. Because you remember, China is sitting on a mountain of cash. They have the world's biggest foreign exchange reserve, $3 trillion at least in official reserves. And then there's people who believe that there's another 3 trillion parked in the massive Chinese banking system, which also belongs to SAFE. So they are looking to spend that money, and they're doing it in a big way, but increasingly in renminbi. So that is what you have to understand. And then you also see that there are state-owned commercial banks which are increasing their activity levels quite a bit as well. So these are Bank of China, ICBC, and others. The other thing that we find quite interesting is that China is following a two-part strategy. One is what we call firefighting, which is like you have a bunch of problems coming out, so you're kind of giving liquidity injections to take care of it, but they're also doing long-term future-proofing to make sure that this portfolio remains sustainable. You know, we're at SDPI, so sustainability is quite important. So what they're doing now is, it's quite interesting. If you look at the top left chart, you see a lot of the peach color showing syndicated loans. So syndication is a mechanism that is not a Chinese invention, it's a Western invention, but the idea is that when a big 500 million or 1 billion or bigger project is being implemented, the fiduciary risk of that is so large that a single lender is not able to, take that. So what they do is they form a group of lenders, a consortium, and they take little pieces of that and say, HSBC will give $300 million, Exim Bank will give $300 million, and so on. So the proportion of projects that are benefiting from syndication is now more than 50% of the new projects. So what they're essentially doing is they're giving the financial due diligence responsibilities to the lead arranger. Every syndicate has a lead arranger. And 80% of the time, lead arrangers are now non-Chinese institutions. HSBC, Standard Chartered, Citibank, all of them are in this business, where Exim Bank will stand behind them and say, please go ahead and do your due diligence and we'll park our money there. So it's a smart strategy because instead of reforming their institutions, they're basically saying we'll outsource the risk management to these other entities. Similar story is playing out on the ESG side. These are the hotspots of environmental, social, and governance risk. And you can see this. I'll leave the slides and they're publicly available as well. But the story is that when I see this picture, we see a lot of environmental risks and a little bit of social and governance risk also coming up. But the patterns are such that wherever the projects are, you see it's the same proportion of risk everywhere if on the any risk category, which means that I cannot say that certain parts of the world are more or less vulnerable to these risks. We have, for those of you who might be interested in research, what we've done is in our report in chapter 2, we have basically used GIS to see where all the protected regions of the world are for environmental, which means the national parks, national forests. IUCN puts out this massive data set where you can see, and we are seeing we're looking for projects which have been put within the national parks. Like we had this case in Pakistan, in Islamabad right here, where some people wanted to do more construction on the Magla Hills National Park and it was blocked by the Supreme Court. Similar stories are playing out in different parts of the world. So we check that. We also check, again, Harvard has put out a data set that enables you to do that. We have checked against the home districts of leaders. What proportion of projects are being funded in the home districts of leaders? Because in Sri Lanka's case, this is one of the big stumbling blocks that they face. So we've done those kinds of things and have flags. I will not go into the details, but I would urge you to read the report. It has a lot of this detail and the appendices are full of data. Now, another incredible thing has happened, and I think this is happening in the context of the syndication I was talking about. What we do is one of the big claims that G7 countries have been making is that, yes, China has the advantage of speed and scale. We cannot compete against that. But the infrastructure that we will fund through the World Bank and through bilateral means is going to be more sustainable. It's going to be higher quality infrastructure. We have better guardrails. We have better protections. So when the World Bank, for example, gets involved in the Dasu hydropower project, they will force the government to have a biodiversity plan, and for every tree you have to put 10 trees and so on, those kinds of environmental protection requirements. However, again, going back to what I was saying about the Chinese nervous system, today what we find through original unredacted loan agreements that we have analyzed, 57% of the portfolio now coming out of China has strong ESG safeguards. So no longer is China in that mode where they are just coming and saying, you government of Pakistan, follow your own EPA requirements and we'll do the project. They are actually being more stringent about it because they know that if you don't do that, then the projects are not sustainable. They run into problems and creates reputational risks. And here's an even more interesting thing. When you compare the projects which have stronger safeguards with those which don't have, there is absolutely no difference in the speed of implementation. So somehow the Chinese are able to deliver projects at a higher quality at the same speed. And by the way, when we do the numbers, we see that an average on average, Chinese infrastructure project is being completed in 3 years. And the same comparable project, World Bank takes 7 years on average to commence the project, not to complete it, just to start the project, because of all these guardrails that they've put together. So if you are a Nawaz Sharif or an Imran Khan starting a 5-year term in office, you know that if you sign with China, you will cut the ribbon before the next election. In fact, right in time for the next election. But if you sign something with the World Bank, your predecessor might be cutting the ribbon. So from that perspective, also China has a very, very strong value proposition, which is why I think it's a wake-up call. This report presents a wake-up call to G7 countries who are trying to compete with this. Finally, what is happening on the reputational front? Basically, what we did is if you look at all developing countries in the world, we looked at Gallup World Poll data, the media sentiment data, and General Assembly voting data. And then we looked at the distribution. We created a score and we looked at the distribution, and we divided the countries into 3 big categories, but really 4 categories. Countries which are safe bets for China, which means they are pretty much in China's camp in terms of acceptance, and we all know where Pakistan is. Pakistan is definitely in the safe bet category for China. And then countries which are moonshots, or like far away from their reach and moving more towards the West. And then there are 2 categories of toss-up countries, which are kind of in the middle, which these are the countries that are at play. And remember what I was telling you about the Chinese nervous system? It's very clear here that it is at play. 2/3 of all aid and credit in the late BRI years is going into countries which are in the toss-up categories. So they know which countries are up for grabs and where there is a need to make their influence increase, and they're doing that. And the strategy that China is following, I think, is that countries which are in the moonshot categories, the ones that are closer or getting closer to the West, they don't give too much money there. It's 15-16%. Of course, I'm not making a causal claim. It's a correlation, but it's just an indication of the way in which things are. And so what I would like to, if you look at chapter 4 in our report, there are 2 case studies that kind of illustrate that, one is Zambia, which is a case where China was facing headwinds. Zambia was running into repayment difficulties as early as 2018. And when they face headwinds, they lay low, which means they stop doing more projects. And when they have tailwinds or support behind them, then they double down. And Bangladesh is a great example of that. Bangladesh is increasingly becoming, or already has become, a one-party state. Sheikh Hasina has complete control over the system, and the Chinese are coming in a big way and doing huge projects. And of course, in the political instability we've suffered in Pakistan over the last 2 years, it's no wonder you're not seeing huge new commitments coming out of China. ML1 is still stuck and so on. So it's part of the global playbook. And this is just the detail of how we came up with these numbers. And I wouldn't bore you with all the details, but my point is that we did country year level analysis to show that China is much more likely to put money in toss-up countries than you would expect in terms of simply looking at the weights of their population. Last part of, I just want to leave you with a few thoughts, and I hope that we can have a conversation after this about questions. I've given you a lot of data. When you look at the statistics, what has China done in Pakistan? And I should say that there are official definitions of what is and what is not part of CPEC. We don't follow those definitions. We follow the OECD's guidelines, which is any official sector financing coming out of an official Chinese entity going into Pakistan is recorded in this. So overall, we found 482 projects, out of which 350 have been completed, 79 are active, and only 3 were cancelled or suspended, and 46 are pledged. So pledges are these promises that when our leaders go to Beijing, there's always these MOUs and these big announcements that come through. Like when Imran Khan, I remember, came back, they announced a big project that was going to come in Karachi. But it is not until we have the financing agreement signed that we would consider it to be a commitment. It's just a pledge. Pledge means a promise. कि मैं आऊंगा, मैं करूंगा, मैं देखूंगा. लेकिन commercial contract is different. Total value of Chinese aid and credit we have counted to be about 70 billion. And again, for those of you who are interested in the sources and the data, we have over 5,000 sources backing this. So of course, we all know this story. Look at the dramatic increases in Chinese development financing in Pakistan that came in 2015. 2013, of course, is when globally the BRI was announced. We had a new government in Pakistan. Then we had the dharna, and the visit of Chinese president got delayed. In 2015, finally, China came to the party in a big way. And then, of course, since 2018, the scale of new commitments has been going down. So where has the money gone? We all know this, 40% is going in the energy sector. In fact, with $28 billion, this is the single largest energy portfolio that China has anywhere in the world. So we are getting more energy projects than anywhere else. And then we have general budget support, which are those deposits and the swaps that I'm talking about, transport and storage, and so on. So the biggest ones before to 2017 and 2018 were transport and energy. And of course, we all know that already. And then, of course, I used to do this chart. This chart used to get a lot of attention. Last time we released our report, Dawn ran this on the front page. I had an older version of this. And at that time, the story was that China is outspending the US by 8 times in Pakistan. Now that is not even a relevant comparison because, of course, the scale of Chinese financing in Pakistan has increased so much that it is far beyond what the US is doing. So there is, a huge gap. But of course, the gap is shrinking. Again, some of the landmarks, you all know this context, but I just wanted to display this on a long trajectory to understand what kinds of issues could have been driving these. So we had the visit 2010 of the Chinese premier. I didn't see much of a change, but it was 2013, 2015 that a lot of changes took place in the portfolio. And then I did this simple comparison just to give you an idea of how through different political administrations in Pakistan, what did we see? So in the Musharraf years from 2007 to 2008, budget support was bigger than anything else. In the Zardari and PPP years, energy started to come into the mix. Of course, the scale of energy financing was quite small. We only got $10 billion at that time over the entire PPP government of 5 years. And in the Nawaz Sharif and Abbasi or PMLN era, we got large scale projects. Look at this, $36 billion. Energy was dominant. And of course, in Imran Khan PTI government, budget support became this. And I think what's important to remember is that the energy and transport sector projects are things that you and I can use. These are productive investments that are coming into the country. Now we've come to the point, and we can have a discussion of why we've come to this point, where we are taking more money for budget support just to keep our system afloat, just to avoid default. And that is not, arguably, this is not an most productive investment that we can get. These are some of the biggest loans that I have found in our data set. State Bank has been drawing down on the currency swap arrangement. I don't know how exactly this is treated, whether it's official debt or not, but we record these anyways from the information, again, that is available. Biggest energy project that we found was for the $4 billion Canoop, this is the Karachi nuclear power plant project, which of course is a huge power plant. And then of course, we have some debt gets a lot of attention. I did an event yesterday at the Bad Lab, and we went and did a deep dive on this. According to our estimates, there's $67 billion in PPG debt, or publicly guaranteed debt exposure to China. We've received $28 billion in rescue lending. We've had 15 debt rescheduling events as well in Pakistan. This is again just Pakistan, but you'll see how the red has now become the dominant part of the mix. This is exactly what I was telling you about earlier. We're doing a lot more emergency lending. And by the way, we don't aggregate rollover amounts in this, because one is stock and one is flow of debt, so we don't count rollover debt in our aggregates, but you'll see how much rollover is taking place. These are basically short-term debts that we take, and then they are rolled over for multiple years. And the implication of this for our friends at the World Bank, and they're aware of this, is that short-term debt, which is less than 12 months, doesn't have to be reported as public debt according to the World Bank's guidelines. But effectively, when you keep getting rollovers, then it actually becomes longer term debt, but still it's not reported. Anyways, I'll stop here. We have some details on ESG in Pakistan, but I know you all have, you'll probably have some questions for me. So I'll pause here and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely wonderful. And congratulations, Dr. Ammar, on such wonderful research and bringing all of this data together. That must be really interesting. So again, really glad to see that BRI is still evolving and developing. So I think definitely we have a lot of questions, but before going to that, I'll be coming to Dr. Khalid Wali. I was working as a research fellow let's stay back for his. So yes, over to you, Dr.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Ammar, for a wonderful, enlightening, and insightful presentation. And the report is phenomenal in terms of data availability. Let me just start with an event I attended a few week back, and that event was China Media Forum, and that event was particularly focused on one thing, and that was how to deal with the rumors, how to deal with the fake news, and how to deal with the propaganda against the BRI and CPAC. One of the major finding was that there is no data available in terms of Chinese loan, in terms of Chinese development. My prime question to you would be that if there is this sort of data is available, then why there is so much misconception about BRI and CPAC and other sort of things? This would be the prime question, and that was the crux of that media forum, Chinese media forum. Second is that let's contextualize what is happening all over the world in terms of development finance and in terms of debt and loan situation. One thing is certain, that China has, in terms of BRI, they are not just rebooting the BRI, they are rebooting the whole development system of the world in terms of their initiatives. For example, Global Development Initiative, their Global Security Initiative, and then this Global Infrastructure Initiative. What they are doing is they are using their theory of change or development theory model, that is internalization. Through their internal circumstances, they started to expand it out, and now they are working their model in terms of dependence theory, and so that they make their sort of decision making in that sense. So that's very important. If we want to contextualize these things, one thing is sure, that comparing China with Western loans or development finance, we see a clear stock between types of investments or types of financing financing the both type of countries or groups do. The Western countries, they are more invested into I would say safer sectors or pre-established sectors. That's why their loans or their development has low cost, or the risk is low. But in terms of China, they think out of box. I would say they invest in the big push model of the development. They invested a lot in the mining sector in Africa. They invested a lot in mining sector in Pakistan, and it is associated with a lots of risk and lots of other socio-economic implication. That's why I think China is now facing major risks in terms of ESG. Let me give you an example. Pakistan was facing back in 2003, 2004, 5, 6, a very major energy sector crisis. And that time, Pakistan had to invest in energy accessibility, developing infrastructure, energy infrastructure. And at that time, the coal power came into Pakistan, and China invested heavily in those coal power plants. But now the game has changed. You showed a very insightful graph that in Zardari and Nawaz Sharif era, the major focus was on energy sector, but now it has changed to budgetary support. But I think the investment in those energy sector plants or projects, now we came to that fiscal deficit again due to that unsustainable sort of investment, because those coal power plants were based on imported coal power plants, and now we are in that distress system, distress kind of financial situation. So Chinese investments, Chinese development model, they are more riskier in terms of sectors. That's why China, I think, have more risk associated with that. And now they are more focused on, I would say, if we see the development of BRI in terms of stages, the first stage was infrastructure centric. The second stage was, I would say, that market centric, are making it more private financing available to the market. And third, this stage, it is more people centric. If we see the speeches of leaders of China or Xi Jinping, you will see that he's talking about innovation-driven investment, talking about the people-centric, cultural-centric, and people-to-people contact and culture-to-culture contact. I think that is the de-risking what China is now looking at to de-risk their ESG portfolio and bringing in more set of people-centric approach and profit people and planet approach to their financial models. Last thing, what I would say that there is some internal reasons for Chinese development financing as well. As you rightly mentioned, that there is trade surplus in China. They need to invest that money somewhere where their investors and financiers got the returns back. Second thing I think is very important is that in the era of 2010 to 2015 to 2018, China made a huge investment in their infrastructure. They built the capacity of their infrastructure related team, you name it, the capital sector, the labor sector. Now, the China do not need that sort of capacity building or that sort of labor force for their own reasons. Now they need to invest that capacity somewhere else. So they are investing in other countries as well so that they can absorb that capacity building or capacity for their own purposes. So there are two, I would say, major things coming out of your report. One is the external global landscape, and second is what is the China's internal needs in terms of rationalizing or explaining these global development finance. So I would say in terms of Pakistan, we need to now de-risk, not just in terms of financial terms, in terms of people-centric terms as well, so that we see more and more equitable socio-economic development. Again, linking back it to the media forum, if we want to counter those fake news argument, we need to show that the Chinese development is people-centric and the benefits are trickling down to the masses, particularly in Balochistan and Gwadar, where the major investments have come into the play. So I would stop here, but making it clear that the Chinese investment and the Chinese development model now is more focused on economy, energy, environment, and keeping the equitable development into the mix so that it is de-risking not only in financial terms, but in terms of socio-economic and ESG terms as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, for highlighting all those points. So I think with this, let's just open the floor if someone has any questions, and then yes, we'll be going towards Dr. Fariha very shortly as well. So if you can just get a couple of questions, and then we'll let Dr. Ammar respond to those as well. Yes, please.
Talking that the biggest risk is political. And wherever you go internationally, you want to read something. And nowadays it comes very often, and they talk about decoupling, US and China and all that. And I think the CPEC and all we have seen is all the trade corridors are east-west. And our corridor is the only corridor which is north-south. And it involves reverse corridor energy from south to north, and the trade that is going to be taking place through that is also different, connecting Central Asia through other routes. Now there is another route, and people say that they are looking forward to build a canal there in Gaza, and because of that, that conflicts is going on. So the biggest risk is not the financial or it is the international. Where do you find Pakistan, especially the country of Pakistan? Where should we place in this international? For example, I was told by someone, I don't know, I couldn't confirm it, that we have explicitly and clearly told Chinese that we are not going to use your money to build that ML1. That would be from the Bretton Woods institution, from the ADB or some other loan. They have been clearly told, and the other things. That's why they are supporting, giving the budgetary support, because in the trough, in the low area, they just want to sustain a country that it should not fall away and fall back into the lap of the other. So where do you place these risks? And what are the places in your reports where you can, with a click of a button, we can find this, I mean, the data on that?
thank you. If we can just have one more question, then we'll let respond. Okay, sure, please, you can go ahead.
As expected, very in-depth and very good presentation. Thank you. I wanted to know how much Chinese led geostrategic changes in the region, particularly Arab world, current geostrategic situation in Arab world or political situation in Pakistan, how much they let it affect their projects from Chinese side, based on your experience. And as I also want to know, as I've been following your work, based on your recent visit to Saudi Arab, KSA, how much Chinese involvement in KSA will be affected by the current geostrategic situation in Arab world? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ammar, if you'd like to come in. Yeah.
Yes, these are all hefty questions. I'll do my best to respond, and I want to add a couple of things about what Dr. Khalid was saying also. So what you were saying about the political risks, I always, my mentors in my early part of my career always used to remind me when we were talking about development that everything is political. Everything is political. So you're absolutely right that political risks are there. There is the area where decoupling is taking place. And if there are people in the audience who have visited China, has anybody visited China recently? When you visit China, you realize that how the decoupling has taken place. Your Gmail stops working. Nobody's on WhatsApp. People are on WeChat. The only platform that I found working was Microsoft or like Outlook that you can still work on. So that decoupling is very much there. And and I think of this as a Pakistani, and from Pakistan's perspective, I think it's critically important for us to avoid falling into this or being decoupled. Because the pressure is already there, but it's going to increase starting with technology, that we can either be on this camp or we can be on that camp. And those of us who are older with more gray hair remember how much this country has suffered from being blindly on one side and not the other. In the last 20 years, I don't have to explain it. So I think it is critically important for us to make sure that we maintain our historic links with the West. But on our own terms, I think it's really important. I think when we do the numbers globally, we have this activity called the Listening to Leaders Survey at 8Data. We have a sampling frame of 100,000 global elites, developing country elites who are secretaries in ministries and thought leaders and others, and we do a survey every year. And what we're finding when we ask them about China and the US globally is that they want the US to provide scholarships, technical assistance, soft things, and they want the Chinese to offer them what they know the Chinese have an advantage in, which is infrastructure. So if what you're saying is true about ML1, I don't see that there is enough financial firepower on the G7 side or political will, frankly, from the West to finance a $6 billion project in Pakistan, 7 billion, at a time when we are on the cusp of financial disaster. So I think that we have to be very careful, and we must make sure that we are balancing those two sides. And as far as Fariha, your question is concerned, yes, I did spend some time in Saudi Arabia recently and had conversations with people. I think that my whole analysis on soft power, it was based on the premise that the US, one of the avenues where the US wants to compete with China is on soft power, that they want to control their soft power. They want to maintain their soft power. They still have a lot of soft power around the world. I remember when KFC and McDonald's first opened in Pakistan, most of people in this room are too young to remember, but I remember standing in line for 4 hours just to get into the KFC, because that's American soft power. We all watch American news channels and read their newspapers and watch Netflix and whatnot. So if the US is serious about maintaining their soft power or increasing their soft power, which then I think they have to reconsider their policy on Israel and Gaza, because this whole strip of land from Morocco to Indonesia people are absolutely outraged, and for good reason, of what's actually taking place. And I think that all of these billions of dollars that they are planning to spend, they're not going to create the intended goodwill in developing countries until this kind of policy is reconsidered. So I think this is, however, as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, I think they will, of course, for now, I think the rapprochement with Israel is on a pause. But I think long term, the Saudis will probably come around and recognize Israel and go ahead with the deal. So that's a given that I have to assume will happen anyways. However, the China and Saudi Arabia are also building very strong business links, and there's lots of Chinese investments flowing into special economic zones in Saudi Arabia. And that again goes back to what I was saying earlier. Money just follows wherever the return is. And there is a huge interest in Saudi Arabia on transition minerals and green minerals. They're investing in Pakistan, apparently, on the Recodic site as well. So we'll see, maybe that's another area where they will collaborate. Yes, I just want to add one more thing about what Khalid Saab said about the data availability. This is because this is close to my heart. This is exactly why I'm here today, because I would like I think we are generally an opinion-driven people. When we sit down and talk in political circles or in our drawing rooms, we are driven by our opinions. And I think we need to use data. And this is why I'm here, because this is just one of many data sources that are available. But I think it's critically important for us to understand what's happening around the world. So let's say if ML1 is being offered to Pakistan, the least that the government should do, or think tanks like STPI and us, all of us should do this, is to study all the rail projects that China has financed in the last 10 years. One of the most famous ones is the standard gauge rail in Kenya. And study the terms and conditions, study the effects that it is having, what kind of safeguards did they put in place, what worked, what didn't work. And only after doing that due diligence should we be in a position to make a decision on whether or not this is a good project for our country. So I think that's, to me, is very important. This is why, the lack of information, lack of transparency creates information void, and that creates misinformation as well. So it's, for me as an academic, it's not so much about being pro this or anti this, it's about facts and data. And I think this is where think tanks can play a big role.
Please, go ahead.
So Dr. Ammar, it's a good news that CPEC is in fact and progressing very well. But how does this data, matches with the progress on ground? Is your data proves that? And one more question is that your emergency loans are inclusive of $70 billion, or?
Yes, they are. 28 out of that is emergency lending.
And if we see that the repayment, it means that just about $35 billion are outstanding.
I'm not sure about that.
So
we don't track the repayments, which is much more challenging.
Okay. And do you think that the governance issues at our domestic levels,
yes,
are is the main reason for slow progress on CPEC project? And how do you see? You are just collecting data, or you are also recommending some measures for overcoming these governance issues? Because this is the main issue, and I think we have to remodel if this model is not working.
Absolutely.
Yes, perhaps also, if you could also request Dr. Fariha and then the colleagues from Universe first to add their questions as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ammar, for a very insightful presentation. I have two questions. First is a shorter one. You highlighted in your presentation that only certain percentage of financing is through central banks, I guess 37%. And so is it contributing to the pileup of the outstanding principal amount, or it's more like an optimal strategy that, that China is following? Second is that some recent studies around BRI countries, including CARIC countries, they have highlighted that whatever FDI induced technology or productivity spillovers have been generated in the recipient countries, still China is still the biggest beneficiary by the end of the day through its outward foreign direct investment, and it's a win-win convergence for China. So I'm just interested in knowing that especially the holistic strategy that you highlighted in your presentation, that the realignment from BRI 1.0 to 2.0, and then how to deal with all types of risk, and then also going to this unconventional approach of routing finance, a limited amount of it through central banking, and then actually reading the psyche of the developing countries' leaders, that they need rapid infrastructure projects, and then a lot of political economy and foreign policy at work, where doubling of financing and or like the tossed up countries terminology that you use. So I'm just interested in knowing that is BRI proving to be the foolproof plan or the tool to deal with all dimensions of the world order?
Yes, I think quickly just one more from the colleague from Renewables First, Basar. You could just go ahead. Or Mark.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your insight. So I just had a question on the repayment risk. If you could just elaborate more on the short-term outlook, like we are in a distressed situation, but the rollovers, I think they cannot continue till perpetuity. So how do you see that ending, and where do you see that going? Like, when would it end, and how would it end? If you could just like elaborate on.
Yes, over to you, Dr.
Great. I think I'll go in the reverse order. So I think if the key thing in the short-term repayment risk, as far as Pakistan is concerned, I think this is the bulk of your question, is the IMF. Even though what we have seen is that when countries default and there is a debt renegotiation that has to take place, so reprofiling that happened in Zambia, it happened in Sri Lanka, Chinese, because they do not participate in the Paris Club, which is a club of rich G7 countries that, among other things, does follow this principle of equal haircuts. They call it like equality principle, that if a country has defaulted, you want to give them some relief, we will equally share that burden around the room. Western countries are used to doing this. There are established protocols. China is not part of the Paris Club. And in both Zambia and Sri Lanka, they were an observer, but they refused to fully participate in the Paris Club renegotiation. They basically cut their own deals with those countries. And one of the advantages that China had in that scenario, by the way, was cash collateral. China, unlike this whole narrative of debt trap diplomacy, which I think should be put to rest, is this idea that China can like grab assets if countries don't repay, that they can come and take over a port. They are smarter than that. What they've done is they've created these escrow accounts, which are lender-controlled accounts where the borrower has to maintain 5 to 10% of the face value of the loan in hard cash that the creditor can debit without seeking any approvals. In banking language, we call it a set of rights. So it's already written in. Anyway, so the key thing that China is doing, however, on the flip side, while they want to negotiate directly with their partners, they have also told big countries, I think this must have happened in Pakistan, although I can't claim that I know it for a fact, but it did happen in Argentina because we've seen letters to this effect, where they've basically said, you must remain in good standing with the IMF, and only then will we continue to provide these bailouts to you. In other words, they want to stand behind the scenes and encourage countries to remain in good standing of the IMF. And I think the reason why they're doing this is because they don't want to be in the business of dictating to Pakistan how much they want to increase the petroleum prices or energy prices, because that would be a nightmare for China. Imagine if they were coming and doing this. So they want IMF to do that difficult work and come and tell countries to reform themselves. And then as long as they're in good standing, they will support it. So I think that's what's going to be key for Pakistan. And this extends to Saudi Arabia and the UAE and other partners, because I think they too are becoming more conscious of how much they're lending and how. So I think for Pakistan, I'm not an expert on Pakistan's debt, but I think we have to go into another IMF program, and that's going to unlock more financing, and then China and others will contribute. And in terms of Dr. Fariha's question, your second question about FDI spillovers and benefits, win-win, and who benefits more, it's very, very important, very interesting, because the allegation on China is that they don't do technology transfers and they just come and extract resources and then go home. I think that in this is not the right way to frame this discussion. I think the right framing is, as citizens of developing countries, we must question our own wisdom in engaging in these projects. So if, let's say in the first phase, as Dr. Khalid was saying, Pakistan was supposed to receive energy and infrastructure projects, which we did, why is it that that has not translated into large-scale FDI inflows from China to Pakistan? And that's because Chinese investors are not obligated to come to Pakistan. They can go to Bangladesh, they can go to Serbia, they can go to Dubai, they can go to Morocco. What is it that we are offering them that is going to be attractive enough for them to come and invest in Pakistan? And like any other financial deal, a deal has to be a win-win. Both sides have something to gain out of it. And from our side, we also have agency, which means our side also had to do our part in order to create that environment for the FDI, so that Rashakai industrial zone would be full of Chinese manufacturing industries and our engineers will be employed there. I think we have to think holistically about our own economic strategy. I don't think we have an economic strategy around special economic zones or around the ML1, where there are first order benefits of infrastructure project, which means that the revenues will be generated, you'll sell tickets and you'll repay the loan. But in economics, we say there's second order benefits, which is the land prices will go up. People will make their own investments. They will improve the supporting infrastructure along the rail. Who is doing that? Who is responsible for that? And what benefits can we accrue? Will there be greater revenue generation in the system? We have to fix our revenue system. So what you were saying earlier about the governance, I think I can link it back to that. I absolutely think that we have to come out of this mindset in Pakistan that something from the outside can come and help us, and that will transform us. Change has to come from within. I don't know of any country that has gone on the path of sustainable development purely on the basis of an external. So it was an opportunity. CPEC gives you an opportunity. Now we're talking about SIFC and other things. But unless and until we get our own house in order, as they say, and provide a competitive environment, this is not going to change. And the last thing, Dr. Fariha, you said about the central bank debt. As I said, I mean, technically speaking, when I look at the World Bank's debt statistics and Pakistan's reporting to the debt statistics, they're just following the rules, which say that if a loan is less than 12 months in duration, you don't have to report it. And most of the debt swap drawdowns, as they call them, I don't think they are being reported because that's in line with this. The World Bank is aware of this, and they are increasingly, I think, talking internally about trying to change that so that there's going to be more transparency on the debt side. But as of right now, I think Pakistan is following the internationally established guidelines, and there's I think not much else to say about that. And last thing I'll say, sir, to your question about the reality on the ground, as I said, the action has now shifted from money coming out of China into developing countries to money going back to China, repayments going back. So we at 8Data have already launched a major data collection effort where we are going line by line, loan by loan, trying to understand what is the outstanding balance on each and every one of the loans. But it is an incredibly slow and arduous task because it is difficult to connect the dots. We have to go through, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Sometimes we find parliamentary committee hearings here in Islamabad, their transcripts are uploaded, where you'll get a little hint on how much Pakistan has paid. Sometimes the Secretary of Finance is called by the Public Accounts Committee, and he makes a statement. And so we are constantly looking for those things and taking the data out. And you're absolutely right that you have to track the progress on the ground also.
Here. I think, Dr. Khalid, you said that initially we did not realize that we did not have the absorptive capacity to undertake this CPEC project. But until, we need to revisit our energy scenario, until we are self-sufficient in energy, how could we sort of match with this massive CPEC projects? We have ignored these oil and gas exploration and renewable, and then we are expecting that we will be matching and we'll be completing these projects on time. So this is a huge gap until we go back and revisit our whole energy model. It is absolutely not possible to complete these projects even in 10 to 25 years down the road. So we need to look at this.
Absolutely
Sure,
right.
if you could shortly respond to this.
Absolutely right. I would say that what the China bring to Pakistan was a big push in terms of development theory. But what Pakistan need to follow with was the Rostovian model of development, and that was step-by-step growth. And that was we start with the traditional society and we go to the preconditions to take off, and then we take off, and then we build that consumption-based society. But we didn't follow that pattern, I guess. We didn't use that big push by China. We didn't integrated our sectors. We didn't use that, I would say, the excess amount of energy to make industrial product. We didn't link to our special economic zones built under CPEC with that excess capacity of electricity so that we can earn dollars or foreign exchange reserves, and now we didn't with that we would be able to finance Chinese loans, and now we're not in this critical situation. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have absorption capacity. We follow that Rostovian model of development. We use that big push from China in a right direction, connecting industry with energy, consumption-based economy to production-based economy, import-based economy to export-led growth. And that, I think that would be the way forward. Increase Pakistan's absorption capacity so that we can
Yes, thank
make
you.
it.
One more thing, that how can this seminar or webinar can help sort of accelerate the CPEC project, and the message can be sort of, sent across to the level where it is being received at present. We need to sort of send this message across to those who are listening.
Well,
Or matter.
from the platform of SDBI, I think we are conducting three-pronged projects under the China-Pakistan Center, Pakistan-China Center, SDPI. First is the greening the CPEC. We are making sure that we are making an economic case of greening the CPEC and interconnecting all those sectors so that there is a bankable and economic case not only for Pakistan but the Chinese investors to invest in the sustainability of finances, sustainability of energy sector, and overall sustainability. What we are doing is we are connecting those stakeholders so that there is more and more bankability of these Chinese investments.
I believe, yes, again, exactly. A lot of role CSOs and the development sector has to play in this, but I think we'll be hopefully continuing discussion with the coffee table following this as well. But let me just come to the colleagues. Ruchi, if you could just very briefly highlight.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for a very good presentation. My question is more general in nature. I would like to ask that, in your opinion, to what extent have these development loans from China contributed to a misalignment of our national and provincial priorities? For example, if you do a budget review, you see that most amount of spending and allocation has been to infrastructure. And that being the case for a country that is grappling with a human capital crisis and a productivity crisis. So to what extent do you think these loans from China are to blame?
Okay, now if yeah, colleagues from Policy Research Institute of Equitable Development. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
If we can just pass on the mic, just for the online colleagues to hear.
We have quite a negative perception about any international financing, like be it World Bank, ADB, or China. Like seriously, we all think that probably we are pretty much selling our own country. So with, like, for example, if we take example of third coal, how much Pakistan energy mix is actually being benefited from what investments are coming from China? Like if we take the example of the third communities immediately, they are in a devastating condition. If we see, like, even if third coal is being extracted and there have been so many new projects that are being inaugurated and so forth. So how much, is there a data set available, any particular data set on how much invested in the energy mix by the Chinese is becoming a part of the energy mix of Pakistan?
Just thank you. If we have any last questions, Tahisa, yes, because this will be the last round. Yeah.
Yes.
They said that the loss of productivity to the tune of 4 trillion in the next 3 years. Much of that amount was siphoned out to the Gulf, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. They disinvested in Europe in their real estate and all that. Where is that money? Where is that $3.5 trillion that they officially written in that? That the thing that triggered it, during your discussion and all that was, you said that they are investing in minerals. So Madan is a company in Saudi Arabia. They are hovering the word, finding a place to invest. They asked us to give, and we failed to give them a land, and now they're aquatic and all that. So where is that money, that $3.5 trillion?
So yes, over to you, Dr.
I have 4 or 5 points that I would like to make. So I'll start in the order. The energy policy, Dr. Khalid is an expert, so he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it symbolizes the point that our colleague here was making about the governance issues and governance failures. I don't think that one can blame China or any external party for, why did you put us in a debt? Because Pakistan had an IPP policy, the power policy, which was put in place in the 1990s, actually with World Bank support, and we got foreign investment at that time. Hub Power and others came. And what China did was basically at a time in 2013 when the PMLN had won the election on the mandate of solving the energy crisis, they wanted to get power grid, supplied by big power generation capacity quickly. And the fastest way to do that was bringing China with its capacity to construct projects and to finance projects quickly. And coal-fired power plants, I think, are faster to do than, of course, building a big dam. So that's why I think in some cases, even in less than 3 years, some of the coal-fired power plants were brought online, and we saw a dramatic reduction in load shedding. If you remember, until 2017, 2018, the power deficit had gone down. So I think this is where, it is but I think it might be considered, it's easy for me to say it's a failure of the IPP policy because we have promised returns in dollars and we collect electricity bills in rupees, and of course, what happened to the exchange rate. It's an unsustainable model. However, I think the reforms that need to happen must happen in our electricity distribution system, and that is where the political economy comes in. I was once told by a former energy minister who later on became even more senior than that, that when he was energy minister, even with the support of the prime minister, he could not fire an XCN, which is an engineer in a distribution company, because they happen to be connected to the local politician. So if we are not a merit-based system, then of course we cannot expect that our governance system will evolve. So I think we have to think. This is why you have to think deeply and hard about what kind of country we want to build and how much merit, how much value do we want to give to merit as opposed to political considerations. So that's really I think the crux of this problem. And I think this greening BRS CPEC, I would love to learn more about this from the STPI colleagues, but I think it's a fabulous idea because China faces a lot of pressure and criticism about not doing enough on climate change and things like that. But now with Pakistan is the forefront of climate change. We suffered through terrible floods last year in 2022. And I think this is a great idea to both work with West through the loss and damage mechanism, but also get domestically produced energy. Because right now, all the electricity, even the hydel electricity, is imported electricity because we have to repay in dollars. Maybe more wind, more solar would be good. Anything that we can do to have homegrown energy, I think, would be a huge benefit. And I think it's in China's interest and it's in Pakistan's interest to launch maybe a China-Pakistan, greening corridor or China-Pakistan clean energy corridor or something like that, because we will continue to need electricity in the future. And I think, yes, again, you raised a great point about, the prioritization. One thing I'll tell you is that I've traveled a lot for my work, and I talk to people in Africa and Latin America, everywhere. And we learn consistently that China, developing country leaders think that China is the most demand responsive donor that they have come across. When they sit across the table from you, they don't bring their own values or their own plans. They say, okay, what do you need? And at that time, when CPEC was being launched, we said we want energy and we want roads. And that's what we got. How we use them, it was up to us. However, you're raising a great point that we need to do where is the investment in human capital? In a country where we have a stunting problem, children don't have enough to eat, the education system is a mess. China is, it's great that they're building energy, but I think what you're saying is long-term, where do we go from here? And this is, again, what I was saying earlier, that Pakistan is not a one or the other. Pakistan is big enough a country, and Pakistan is important enough a country that both the G7 and China will keep engaging with Pakistan. It's up to us in our development strategy, our 5-year plans, to make sure we have made sufficient investments in our human capital. Because without that, you're right, we cannot go up the productivity ladder. And don't forget, we are one of the youngest countries in the world. I think 2/3 of Pakistanis haven't reached their 35th birthday. And that is really a fact that we have to all understand. If we don't educate them, then in our lifetimes, this is not going to change. This is going to stay on like this. And it's very important that you bring this point. I remember that there was an idea of just like when China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was being launched, the Americans were obviously not thrilled about that. There was this idea that the planning ministry coined, which was the US-Pakistan Knowledge Corridor. And the idea was we'll send 10,000 PhDs students from Pakistan to the US. So we'll have two corridors. I think there is some wisdom in that idea, but I think our fundamental problem in education is more basic, elementary, middle school, high school. It's the learning deficiencies that we have to overcome. I don't think that China is in the business of doing that, but we should get help from wherever we can. Although I must say that it will have to change. I don't think that solving the education problem is a very complicated thing. We just need the willingness to make it happen. And the last thing, sir, you said about the Russia thing. I'm not familiar with those numbers, but what I can say is that the critical mineral industry that you talk about, the mining, I think all of that Madan investment is coming from the PIF, which is the Saudi sovereign fund. The Saudis have had a wonderful 2 years, which means that they've run a record budget surplus. They are flushed with cash. I think Aramco made $160 billion profit last year, and that's because oil prices are high. We pay like 270 rupees for a liter. They're benefiting from that. So I think that gives them enormous ability to make strategic investments. And even Saudi Arabia is now changing. They will not, they often say, I think their finance minister said this in Davos last year, that because if I am taxing my own public in Saudi Arabia, I cannot give free money to countries like Pakistan. It's not going to happen. So again, it goes back to the point about governance and how to get our own system and our own policies in line.
Yes, I think. Thank you so much, Dr. Ammar, for such insightful responses. And definitely the data you have shown, I think we can just go on and on, but just in the interest of time, we'll be wrapping today. So I'll be coming to Dr. Fariha for your final concluding remarks and the vote of thanks. So over to you.
So I think so. The many questions put forth by the audience and quite holistically answered by Dr. Ammar. So I would especially like to thanks Dr. Ammar for actually coming to STPI today on behalf of STPI. We're extremely grateful to you and really looking forward to brilliant sessions like these in future, because this session came with a special like delving deeper from the angle of data and evidence, and this again very different insight like the realignment or the strategies that China is offering to BRI and certain concepts which we were not aware before. So extremely grateful for your presence, and a special thanks to Dr. Khalid Waleed as discussant and the audience which is present today in person and online. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. We have tea served outside, so just grab something to eat and we can just come back to have a chit chat on side tables as well. Thank you so much, everyone, again. Thank you.